16th chapter of the book of Mishlei has some fairly well-known lines and pieces, and we'll see some of them. It starts with something that we have in the davening of the high holidays. Le'adam ma'arche lev u'me'adonai ma'aneh lashon. A man can arrange his thoughts, but what he says depends upon God. God is the one who's in charge ultimately of the lashon. God is the one who, in a sense, you could say, gives the beautiful voice and gives that to people. Obviously, there are people who have a good voice. You take voice lessons, your voice gets even better. But so much of it we know ultimately comes from God. Kol darchei ish zach beinav v'tochein luchot Adonai. All the ways of man seem right to him, but God probes the motives. Right? You can convince yourself that anything is the right decision. Go el Adonai ma'asecha. V'yikonu machshevotecha. Entrust your ideas, your affairs to God, and your plans will succeed. Kol poal Adonai lema'anehu v'gam rasha liyom ra'ah. God made everything for a purpose, even the wicked for an evil day. Obviously, that's a curious verse of theologically. We think about it. God it makes everything, and that's not a controversial idea. But here we're saying God made evil in order to sort of punish it, in order to put it in its place, maybe as a lesson for the rest of us to be good. Toavat Adonai kol gvalev yad liyad lo yinakeh. Every haughty person is a toeva, is an abomination to God, and they will not go unpunished. Eventually, they will get their nikama, their justice will come to them. Bechesed, we're in verse 6, Pasuk Vav. Bechesed v'emet yichupar avon v'yirat Adonai sur meira. Iniquity is expiated by loyalty, by kindness, and by faithfulness, and evil is avoided through fear of God. So here we have a number of verses that really are about reward and punishment, divine justice, which has been mentioned different places in Mishlei. It's not sort of a major theme up to this point. When God is pleased with a man's derech, with the way that a man is walking, with the path, with their conduct, he may turn even his enemies into allies. So, right, somebody who is good enough can even appease his enemy. Somebody who maybe they see that God is with this person and that ultimately they will come to his side. Tov ma'at bitzdaka merov tfuot below mishpat. Better a little with righteousness than a large income with injustice. Do things the right way. That is ultimately better. Tzedek, righteousness, justice, doing things the right way is better, even if at the end of the day it seems that you have less in the piggy bank. Leiv adam yichashev darko v'Adonai yachin tzado. A man can have his machshavot. A man can have his plans, can make his direction, the derech that he's going on, but it is God who directs his steps. Sounds like, right, the Yiddish expression. Was it man tracht und God lacht in my wonderful Yiddish here? Man plans and God laughs, right? So we can make all our plans, but just because we think that's what we're going to do doesn't mean it's going to happen. There is a greater power, a higher authority. Kesem, we're in verse 10, Pasuk Yud. Kesem al siftei melech b'mishpat lo yem al piv. Excuse me, there is magic on the lips of the king. He cannot err in judgment. This is, talking about a wise person who has studied chokhmah and wisdom and moral education and is acting the right way. They're going to speak properly. Peles mosne mishpat la'Adonai maseu kol avnei kis. Honest scales and balances are God's. All the weights in the bag are his work. The second time where we have sort of this mention of this idea of mosne tzedek, which we first see in the book of Dvarim, having your scales and your weights being proper and not cheating people. And here, right, honest scales and balances are God. And here it seems to be referring less to the idea of me not cheating you in business or vice versa, but more of the idea of the honest scales of mishpat, the scales of God's system. How is God judging people? They are God's scales are correct also. It's not we're going to look like the book of Eov, where Eov is going to complain that God does not run the world in a just way. Wicked deeds are abomination to kings, for the throne is established by righteousness. Ritzon melachim siftei tedek v'dover yisharim ye'ehav. Truthful speech wins the favor of kings. They love those who speak honestly. Chamat melech malachei mavet. The king's wrath is death will come of it. The malach hamavet comes because of the king's wrath. But a wise man can appease it. A wise man can do kapara, can gain atonement through proper action to keep death at bay, to keep horrors at bay. Here, the king, is this a regular king? Is this an allusion to God as the king? Remember, the book of Mishlei ascribed to Shlomo, so it's not surprising that it would be a very positive idea of kings here. We're in verse 15, Pasuk Tetvav, Bo'or pnei melech chayim u'tzono ke'av malkosh. The king's smile is chayim, brings life. His favor, his ratzon is like a rain cloud in spring. So who the person who, the person who gets God's favor, they're going to be alive. There's going to be some rain even in the spring, and we'll have what is it? April flowers, May flowers, March flowers. I don't remember which one it is. Kno chochma matov mecharutz uknot bina nivchar mikasef. How much better to acquire wisdom than gold? To acquire understanding is preferable than silver, as we've seen over and over again in this book. This chokhmah, this wisdom, this intelligence, this shrewdness, which has to do, again, with moral education. It's not just being the smartest guy in the room. They are more important. They are greater than silver, than gold, than any wealth. Mesilat yisharim sur meira, shomer nafsho notzer dacho. The highway of the upright avoids anything evil. Sur merat, stays away from the evil. The one who is watching his life, he stays away from these things. If you want to preserve your life, you stay away from these things. The first two words in verse 17, Mesilat Yesharim, is the title of a well-known Musar Sefer from, I believe, the 16th century. Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim Sato, known as the Ramchal, wrote a number of different Sfarim, was a fascinating character in many ways. Most famous work is called the Mesilat Yesharim, the path of Yashar, the path of the upright, and it's a book that's really a pre-Musar book about the way that one should act in order to attain a closeness to God, a closeness to even prophecy, some might say. Continue in verse 18, Lifnei Shever Gaon V'Lifnei Chishalon Gova Ruach. Pride goes before ruin, arrogance before failure, right? So your pride and your arrogance, if it's there, it's going to end up, things are not going to be too good. Don't be too sure of yourself. Don't be too proud of yourself. We said earlier, is God will be the one who sees the path that you go on. Tov, we're in verse 19, Pasuk Yutet, Tov shval ruach et anavim, mechalek shalal et geim. Better to be humble. Better to be amongst the anavim, those who are humble, those who are low, those who are not so arrogant, than to share spoils with the proud. Maskil al davar yimsa tov voteach b'Adonai ashrav. The person who's adept in a matter will attain success, right? Become an expert. Happy is the person who trusts in God. So you can become an expert, but ultimately, what expertise should you have? Voteach b'Hashem. You should trust in God. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have to do anything. You just trust in God. You have to go out. You have to do your part. Hishtadlut, as it's called. It can be with the belief that God will help you. Lechacham lev yikara navon umetek sifatayim yosif lekach. The wise-hearted is called a navon. It's called discerning. We talked in the earlier chapters. We had the chokhmah and bina. Navon, more of sort of an analysis, discernment. So the wise-hearted is called discerning. One whose speech is pleasing gains wisdom. Mekor chayim seichel ba'alav umusar evilim ivelet. So if you have seichel, if you have good sense, you have some street sense, you have a brain on your head, you have a head on your shoulders, you're thinking things. If you have that, that is a mekor chayim. That is a fountain. That is a way of life. And those who don't, right? Folly is the punishment of the fools. Words that we've had a lot here. Evilim, evil, this idea of folly. Leiv chacham yaskilu pihu v'al sifatav yosif lekach. The mind of the wise man makes his speech effective, right? You know what you're saying. You've studied, you've learned, you have a good moral education. What you're saying is generally going to make sense. And it increases the wisdom on his lips. Suf devash imre noa matok lanefesh umarpei la'atzem. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweet to the palate and a cure for the body. Honey, which helps with eyesight and other things. And here there's questions and just generally Dvash. When we talk about honey, when we talk about the Sheva, the 7 species of land of Israel, we talk about Dvash. That is date honey. That's not regular. That's not bee honey. We think of honey, we think of bee honey, but there's also date honey. I remember a number of years ago, I was in Israel right before Rosh Hashanah, and I brought home date honey to use to make use with my challah Rosh Hashanah. We didn't use it on Yom Kippur, I promise you, because dvash, it's a lot sweeter than bee honey. Yesh derech yashar lifnei ishva charita darchei mavet. A road may seem right to a man, but at the end it is a road to death, right? We think we're so sure. We think in our view, in our narrow view, we know exactly where we're going, what we're doing. It doesn't always work that way. Nefesh amel omla lo ki achaf alav piu. So laborers, the appetite of a laborer labors for him because his hunger forces him on, right? A person needs to work. He's just working and more working and more working because he has to feed his family. Ish blial korei ra vial sifato ke'esh tzarevet. A scoundrel. What does he do? He's got evil on. He's always plotting evil on his lips. His lips are like a scorching fire. This word blial we've had from time to time mentioned it. It's exactly the origin. Bliol, without a yoke, without the yoke of God upon you, without aliyah, they can't get up. It's a word that's used to describe scoundrels, bad people. When Hannah is accused by Eli HaKohen of being a drunk woman, really she's just a sincere woman pouring out her heart to God to have a child, she says to him, do not make me a bat blial. The people who are blial, later in that same episode and story, Eli's sons, Hophni and Pinchas, are described as that way, as are many people there towards the end of the book of Shoftim, the book of Shmuel. It's a word that really is used to describe evil people, bad people, is that word Belial, the person without the yoke, or the person who will not ascend. Ish tapuchot yishalach ma'adon, we're in verse 28, v'nir gan mafrid aluf. So a man who switches things around, a shifty, a trickster, stirs up strife. Had this description last couple chapters, this ish tapuchot. And a quarrelous person alienates his friend. You're always fighting. They don't want to be friends with you anymore. Ish chamas yifatere evo lichol b'derech lo tov. A lawless man misleads his friend, making him take the wrong way. It's sad to think about this verse where so much of the world seems to have been seduced by the Hamas story. The word yifateh pitoy means to seduce. Here it's being used as the right to seduce this person. You're leading them in the wrong way. We think of Hamas and how many people have been seduced to their narrative of victimhood that they claim. He closes his eyes while meditating deception and upheaval. He purses his lips while deciding upon evil. Gray hair is the crown of glory. It is attained by the way of righteousness, right? This is, saying the people who get old, this is, they live a long time. We talked about the people here who think that they know what they're doing. They don't listen to God. And they end up going down a bad path. Tov erachapayim gibor moshel brucho miloked. Better to be forbearing than mighty, right? Better to be slow to anger than mighty. And to have self-control is greater than conquering a city. That's what that's what this is. This line is used in one of the greatest hits of all of the Mishnayot, when Ben Zoma says, "Ezehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro." Who is the person who is strong? Is the one who is able to subdue their will and their lust and their desire. He cites this verse. It's better to be forbearing and slow to anger than mighty. Better to have self-control, really the second half of the verse, than to conquer a city. Ume kol mishpato. Lots are cast into the lap. The decision depends upon God. So chapter, as we've said, the last number of chapters, no specific one theme to it, lots of different things that are going on that are happening, but some, well-known phrases, like we said, this phrase, Mesilat Yesharim, famous book by the Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, a book of ethical teaching how to act properly, the underpinning or the proof text of the verse of Ezehu Gibora Koveshet Yitzro, who is the strong person, one who's able to conquer his we'll call them illicit desires, and a lot here about God's justice and mishpat, and the king is in charge, presumably allusion to God, and if you get the king's favor, then things will turn out okay for you.